Thank you, everybody who's joining us today. My name is Ashley McCreary, and I'm a marketing coordinator here at Service Objects. Today, we'll be discussing customer data validation, making better decisions about the customers you serve. This should be about a 45-minute webinar. We will have a Q&A section at the end. We have a chat box there to the right at the bottom of your screen where you can put your questions in throughout the webinar. So this is where I hand it off to Rob Manser.
Thanks, Ash, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Today, as Ashley mentioned, we're going to be talking about customer data validation and how that supports really informed decision-making that can help you better serve your customers. I put together a short agenda. Today, we'll talk about why accurate customer data is critical. I mean, I think it's obvious, but I think sometimes we miss out on what that really means. And then we'll talk about customer data validation and how it supports that accurate customer data. And we'll look at how that works. I believe Ashley has a quick poll that we'll go over there. And then after that, we'll look at how customer data validation and accurate information helps you make better decisions. And we'll look at 5 use cases around just the address field today. And then we'll leave a little time for question and answers at the end. If there's a little bit of time at the end and anyone wants to, I can demo maybe 1 or 2 of our services that sort of highlight the outputs that you'll see from us. With that said, let's just dive in. So customer accounts. Like I said, it's intuitive. I think we all know the importance of accurate customer and prospect data, and that can't be overstated. Ensuring each account is accurate and verified is critical to providing valuable insights and helping make informed data decisions for you and your customers. And that's really where customer data validation comes in. Now, if we start to look at a customer data profile, we're really looking at the 5 core identity attributes: their first and last name, and that might also be a business name instead of a person, an address, a phone number, and their email address, and of course the IP address, or what we call device, and the IP address associated with that. These attributes can all be extended or validated and then extended to give you valuable insights into your customers and your prospects. And it really helps facilitate that data-driven decision-making, which is going to be beneficial for both your customer and you. So what does customer data validation really positions your company and companies to create genuine connections and make informed decisions. Knowing that you're talking to a real person with real customer data really makes that simpler, and it really fosters trust between you and your customers, and it fosters trust in your decisions. The customer data validation will power customer insights, whether it's demographics or some of the location intelligence you'll get, right up into ensuring that your email and your email reaches their intended targets, and maybe phone numbers that you have are accurate. It's going to elevate that customer experience. It's going to allow you to do some of the target marketing and segmentation and personalization, that all of these things that improve contact rates and sort of the communication with your customers. It's going to help ensure compliance. It's going to really support the data privacy regulations, both globally and regionally, as well as sort of ensure the audit process and all that other stuff it goes smoothly. It's going to help. We've seen this over and over again. A large part of our customers use it for helping identify and minimize fake accounts and fraud. We find that fake accounts are kind of the Trojan horse to bigger fraud events and stuff like that. And so just preventing bad customer data getting in there, malicious bad customer data getting in there, is going to reduce some of those risks for you. And all of this starts with customer data validation. So what is, what is customer data validation? It's bringing together global authoritative customer data sets from all kinds of different authorities. If you think of the postal authorities like the USPS or Royal Mail or Canada Post, even to the over 8.6 global phone numbers that we have that come from all of the different phone service providers around the world. There are 4,000 phone service providers in the United States alone. And so if you think of all of those coming together and bringing that data together into a authoritative customer data set or a data profile, and then we marry that with really powerful AI that we've developed over 20 years. So this isn't something that's going on, and it's being constantly updated and refined to provide even better and more more multifaceted contact data. The more we can append to this and validate, the better. And this is all done in milliseconds. This isn't, we're going to go over the 4 layers here, but it's really important to understand that these 4 layers really just happen instantaneously or within under a second. So when using customer data validation, you're really looking to verify the record, and then where you can augment and extend or add more data around it, and use those points to really validate and give you that. So what I'd like to do is just take a few seconds to go through each of these layers and talk about them a little bit, and then let's dive in. So the first one is that fundamental integrity check, and really that's what we're doing here is making sure that the data provided matches or can be corrected to match some part of the authoritative data file that we have. So, and depending on what they give us, so name, address, phone, email, and device, or any or all of those can be validated at the same time. And each piece of that information is, once it's verified, it allows us, I mean, again, if you think about, if you start with garbage in, you're going to push it through this funnel, you're not going to get good data at the bottom end of it. And so really the core value of this first line of defense is to make sure that the data coming in is corrected and is valid before moving into the next levels of data validation. So the next level then, after getting accurate data, is to move to the augment and extend. And really what this is meant to sort of suggest is, with all of those data sets that we have, there's a secondary information that comes with the data sets. And so we're able to, as for an example with an address, we're able to say, a simple example, a very basic simple example is to say maybe append the +4 in a zip code. Or if you are running phone numbers through the system, maybe we're going to give you phone type and porting information if that's what you need. If you're worried about fraud, maybe you're looking at IP and seeing if they're using a proxy. Addresses can give us latitude and longitude, and those can be used for delivery logistics or route planning. And then, or simply put, if you have a phone number, you can derive the name and address, and that information can be used, A, to know their name and address, but B, to be CrossValidator going into the next level here. And those information points can be used to cross-validate, basically, or create these interconnections between it. So if you give me your name and your address and then your phone number and maybe I'm going to capture your IP, I'm able to sort of derive all of these location identity points, for example. So maybe your address says you're in Santa Barbara, your phone number is registered in Santa Barbara, but your IP address says you're in China. Then there's a little bit of a myth or an inconsistency in your data, and that might create trigger some business rules that you develop around those things. But what these cross connects and interconnections let you do let us do is create a very simple, sophisticated but simple output of what we call quality signals. And those quality signals are essentially, they're giving you the quality and accuracy of the customer record in a numeric value. And those numeric values really allow you to start building out and automating a number of business processes, whether it's marketing, segmentation, fraud detection, or any of the other things that we've talked about or that we will talk about today. But so a simple example is if you get a low scoring number, it doesn't mean that you necessarily want to not deal with that customer, but you might send them for internal review as an automated example. Or if they're a really high scoring customer, maybe you're going to accelerate them to your best performing sales team or something like that. But we'll dive into some of those use cases in a minute. But before we do that, I think Ash has a quick little poll she wants to put up.
Yes, let me push it out. So the question is, when was the last time you validated your customer data? Real time, 0 to 3 months, 6 to 12 months, once a year, or never? So while you guys are answering that poll, Rob, I do have a question for you pertaining to customer data validation. So in terms of user experience, how seamless is it for businesses to integrate and utilize customer data validation within their existing systems?
Sure. It's a good question. A couple of things to note. As I mentioned, it's very fast. This is a real-time. These are usually delivered in real-time APIs. We do batch services as well. If you have a big file or a historical cleanup that you want to do, we're happy to do like a batch service. But for the most part, our clients deploy customer data validation through APIs, and those APIs can be wired directly into your lead capture forms or your checkout forms or wherever you want to do them. They can be plugged in between where the website might capture the information, but before it's being transferred to maybe your CRM, you might do it there. But the reality is, it's wherever you need to deploy it, but it's seamless. It's really what we see for the most part is in the e-commerce environment, for example, someone might put the form up and help the customer correct their address so that there's not a misship, which is a big deal, and we want to catch them and the customer at the real time to help get it right. But there are a number of cases where the businesses might actually can wait a little bit to correct the data. So maybe they're going to capture the raw customer data from them, and then before they move it into the CRM, they're going to evaluate and correct it, and potentially apply business rules to whether or not it goes into the CRM based on the results of that. So it's going to depend on where you want, or where your needs are, and where you want to deploy it. But when you do, it's seamless, and it's very lightweight in how it works. So.
Awesome. So it looks like we have some results, and it's ranging all across the board from 0 to 3 to once a year.
Not a surprise. We'll definitely take a look at some of sort of the types of or some of the different sort of windows of customer data validation and when you should do it or why you should do it. But let's dive into some examples first, and maybe it'll be more apparent of the importance of doing it more frequently, and maybe semi-annual sort of historical cleanups as well. So with that said, this goes without saying, and I feel like it's sort of common sense to most of us, but I think businesses, there's a study done this year of data and analytical professionals, and they really highlighted sort of the dichotomy, or the friction between, I know I want to make good, strong decision-making goals, and that's that 77%. 77% of people say, yep, I want to make data-driven decision-making goals. That same group said, but only 30% of us trust our data. Or 70% really struggle to trust the data that they would make these decisions on, and that is the rub, if you will, of data validation for us. It's you need good data to make good decisions, but maybe you don't know how to get it, or you can't trust the data that you have to do that. And so, what customer data validation does is it really helps build trust in your data. You're going to see the real power of it when we start to validate and verify any one or all of the 5 key attributes: that name, address, phone, email, and IP. And from these attributes, like we talked about, we can derive over 130 additional data points. And so not only correct the address or correct those data points, but append a bunch of other really critical data points that can help you make good decisions. And we'll talk about all the different ways that you can use this, and ultimately resulting in that score that allows you to drive a lot of that. But overall, what we're really looking for here is to instill some confidence in your data that allows you to use the data to make these decisions. So what I thought we'd look at is maybe one sort of silo around address, the field address and what it can do for us. And so as we talk about, customer data validation goes beyond accuracy. Of course, we're going to correct the address where we can, and we're going to make sure that it's deliverable, but it's also going to give you other critical insights into your customer. And so we have a service called Address Insight. We have over 20 services that sort of address all or some of those key attributes. But in this case, we're going to talk about Address Insight. And what this service does is it returns 3 sort of buckets of information. One is, of course, an address and all of the corrections that go with it, including the zip plus forward, stuff like that. But secondarily, we're going to give you the demographics around that location. And then also we're going to give you the geo coordinates. That's the longitude and latitude, and maybe the time zone and offsets and stuff like that. And those pieces of information can drive a number of different things for us. And so, from personalization to compliance, and we'll look at each one of these. But keep in mind that this is just driven off of the initial address provided by the customer. So personalization. McKinsey has a report out. It's pretty. I think if you're a marketer and you probably know this, and even if you're not, you intuitively understand that when something is addressed directly to you, you're more likely to react to it. You're more likely to respond to it. And so McKinsey did a report, and they found that 71% of consumers really seek that personalized interaction. And so customer data validation allows your business to confidently personalize things to them or tailor it to the customer. And that results in improved response rates. And so if you're running an email campaign, you're going to see better open rates and better click-through rates. If you're sending out text messaging, you're going to get quite a heavy lift in response rate by personalizing it. And of course, in direct mail, this has been tried and true for a long time. If you get my name right on the address, I'm more likely to open it on the envelope. I'm more likely to open it, and that's going to increase response rates. In fact, it's almost 135% to that. So that's just one example of personalization and how it can improve it. But maybe let's go a little deeper into maybe the target marketing that and segmentation that you can use address for, and the other data points that you get from it. And on the right here, you can see some of those other data points that come from it. This is not an exhaustive list at all, but so one of the first things, of course, is demographics. We're going to see you're going to get age, income, education, all of those things that sort of help you build a profile around your customer and segment them. You're going to be able to identify some consumer patterns based on maybe where they're located. So maybe, as an example, if you're in California, maybe it's surfboards. If you're in Montana, maybe it's ski gear, as an example. So it may be obvious examples, but it does help you data-wise help segment that. So, and then we're going to have competitor mapping. You're going to look at hey, what competitors are in that space around your customers, and maybe that's going to help you explain some of the lower sales in your area, or some of the challenges you might need to do, or introduce opportunities to go market against the competitor versus just more of a general marketing. It's also going to expose some of the market gaps that you have, and so you're going to find regions that are unmet. So once you start to look at your customers, and maybe if you're using store locator, or you're placing stores in certain locations, this is going to help you determine where you want to put a store, and maybe what products and services you're going to put in that store. It's going to improve your efficiency in advertising. Again, just by segmenting and marketing and target marketing, excuse me, it's going to allow you to, in essence, it's going to drive that. It's going to allow you, most regions can have their own distinct events going on. And so maybe, I know in Santa Barbara, where Service Objects is, Earth Day is a big day in there. In fact, Earth Day was started in Santa Barbara. And so it's a big event in Santa Barbara. And so maybe there's things that you want to do to your customers in that area. You want to market to them about Earth Day or something like that, as an example. Again, I talked about store location. It really just helps you understand maybe where your customers are, your customer density. Maybe they can be better served by a location different than where you are or want to go. In going back to the marketing side of it, if you're doing digital ads, but you want to do a specific, maybe you're doing campaigns for a muffler shop in a certain area, you can control the digital ads and only show them in the sort of the geographically appropriate areas for those. It's also very helpful with resource prioritization. It really allows you to figure out where you want to spend your dollars, in marketing or, in marketing. And one of the big things that's one of the reasons Service Objects was founded was about sort of environmental concerns around waste. And what we have found is that you can tailor some of your marketing and stuff like that, and really refine it and become more efficient to prevent some of those things. So you can really get into more of environmental or social concerns based on local values, and you can use your customers' locations to sort of help you understand what they may or may not be supporting in their area, and help drive messaging for that. So that's just marketing alone. Let's talk a little bit about how that address and the location intelligence that comes with it can drive some of your delivery logistics. The first thing, obviously, is getting the address right is going to improve your route planning and make sure that the product is delivered. But it's also going to help you plan for quickest paths, reducing drive time and fuel costs. It's going to allow you to look at traffic and do maybe possibly rerouting in real time, because the address is the pin that they're going to that is accurate. It's going to allow you to see, potentially even plan for some of that those traffic problems using historical data, and especially if you're starting to connect the dot on a route, it's going to really help you that. And if you have confidence that the addresses are correct and it's the delivery locations, this all becomes far more reliable to go into. It's gonna allow you to give real-time customer updates to about the packages that are being delivered to them. In their ETAs. On the business side of it, it's going to allow you to figure out where to put a warehouse. It's like Amazon, for example, is building warehouses all over the country right now, but they're very strategic about where these have been placed. And so whether that's customer location versus warehousing, drive time, all those other things come into play. But this is a piece of that data that they use to calculate these things. They're going to look at risk avoidance. Are there high risk areas, not just traffic areas, but maybe crime is a problem. The whole idea of porch pirates is a problem. So maybe you're going to look at certain neighborhoods that have a higher level of risk, and you're going to find different ways to deliver product there, or you're going to maybe suggest that they use one of their more local delivery hubs versus on the front porch. The geofencing is a really if you are, rather than thinking about delivery logistics, but maybe you're delivering services, and you have your vans out delivering HVAC as an example, and maybe they only are allowed in certain areas, or that each area is designated to a specific driver. You want to make sure that they adhere to that, and so that geofencing helps because you can determine what addresses fall into which categories for them, and that'll help with adherence to the route planning. The same thing is density planning. How many drivers do you need to send out in an area if it's really dense? So if you have 100 deliveries, you might need to do two trucks to go out, and that's just going to allow you to optimize that planning. You're going to look at precise location data. Sometimes, or many times, what you'll find is a delivery location is an address, but it's actually the 15th floor on a building. Well, what you want to be able to do is allow your drivers the time to deliver that, whether they're delivering to the 15th floor or not. Maybe the lobby is a little more cumbersome or things like that. So what you really want is to have as precise a location to the address that's provided. And so they're different things. And we really want that. We don't want to avoid, we want to include that precision if we can, especially when it comes to deliveries. And again, the last thing is, the shorter the routes, the more environmentally friendly it is for all of us. And that's, again, all comes from that single location, that single address, and the location intelligence that we can derive from it. So maybe switching gears a little bit away from the customer and more to you, but also the customer. We can look at fraud and how location intelligence really helps with fraud, or helps prevent fraud or detect fake accounts being created. And again, using address as the sort of the base here, we can see that just looking at their IP and the location and the address location they provided, is there a disconnect between them? So again, if you're in Santa Barbara, but your IP says you're on the other side of the world, it's likely that you want to look at that account. We're not always saying flag them as fraud and throw it out, but we are suggesting, and it's really up to how the business rules you write around that work to do that. But step one is identifying that there's a disconnect, and then you can identify activities that are happening using the same location. If I have already created an account with you that says I'm in Santa Barbara, but all of a sudden my login is happening on the other side of the world again, that's a different sort of fraud flag that you could be looking for. So it's not just on the account creation, but after the account's created and people log in, you want to maybe compare their locations and see if there's any risk there. It's kind of in the same vein as the login consistency. Are they always logging in from one location? And if they are, then it's atypical when they log in from a different one. It's slightly different than being apart from each other, just maybe saying, hey, I always log in from Santa Barbara, but now you're logging in from Toronto. Is there a problem here? You can also use the location information and the address to really know where the customer says they are, and then from a different data set, understand that, hey, this is a high fraud hotspot location-wise. Again, we start to think of regions of the world where maybe more, let's just call it nefarious actors are trying to access these accounts. And so once you know those are fraud hotspots, and you start to see accounts maybe being generated in those, you should raise some alarms. So again, we go back to that device location. This is maybe a little bit more beyond just location intelligence. It's location intelligence maybe married with their phone data. So now we're starting to look at it and say, hey, you gave me this address that says you're in Santa Barbara, but your phone data says you live outside of that area, and it's inconsistent, and it should again potentially raise cause for concern. Excuse me. Of course, address verification is important here. Not in that we want to get the address right, and we want to check that the address actually exists, because if it's actually hard to create real addresses in a real profile for fake intent. So if you're just trying to make up an address on the fly, like 123 Main Street in Santa Barbara, California, that's going to fail. And so what we're looking for is those failures where people are making up addresses, or just maybe hand hammering their addressing because they don't want to provide that. Those are those are again more flags of fraud that you want to look for. Again, you can look for behavioral patterns in here, and this is going back to location. And this might be more of a composite look at location, saying, hey, we know that anyone from this area acts this way, and they're acting outside of that. So it's a little more of a sophisticated look, but we see a lot of this in the financial industries and institutions that use our services. They're looking for as many ways to validate and verify a customer and or look for possible fraud flags. And this has been one that we've seen them deploy over and over again, and it's been effective. Two-factor authentication is becoming pretty ubiquitous in our world. But one of the things, it can slow down and create friction, especially when maybe you're trying to purchase something and stuff like that. And so there are rules you can set around two-factor authentication that says, hey, this person keeps logging in from the same IP address in the same location every time. We're very confident that this is who they are. So maybe we're going to maybe either skip two-factor authentication or give a simpler version of two-factor authentication to make it faster and easier for them to log in. In the same sort of conversation, you could be looking at simultaneous logins, but they're different from apart. So if I'm in Portland, Oregon, and Ashley's in Santa Barbara, and we're both trying to access the same account, I should probably flag you a little bit that, hey, there's two people trying to access the same account from two different locations. It doesn't have to mean that they're simultaneously doing that, meaning within seconds of each other, but maybe within some predetermined time frame where that might be a flag. The last one is one of my favorites. CAPTCHA is, how many more times can I identify the crosswalk in the motorcycles? I'm not sure. It can be very frustrating when you don't get them right. There's a high abandon rate around CAPTCHA. And CAPTCHA is really meant to deter bots, not people. And so if you can modify CAPTCHA to, again, recognize that this person that's attempting to access their account is coming from the same location that they always come from, maybe you don't even fire up CAPTCHA for them, given that you're confident that they're already who they are. So again, there's a number of different ways you can use it, but preventing that fake account from starting, preventing that sort of Trojan horse of bad actors getting in through fake accounts is sort of step one in preventing fraud and all the fallout from it. Which brings us to compliance. Compliance is, becoming, especially around data privacy, that is just becoming larger and larger, more restrictive, more onerous on the business. One thing that is important to remember about compliance, especially data privacy, it is on the business. It's the business's responsibility to ensure that they capture accurate customer data. And so again, customer data validation in and of itself is all about that. It's about making sure the data that's provided is accurate, and if it's not, flagging where it's not. And so right off the top, customer data validation is in support of data privacy compliance. But more specifically, there are hundreds of data privacy laws out in the world. The GDPR in the EU, the CCPA in California, the TCPA for call centers, all of these different privacy laws and regulations are region specific. Now the regions might be large and small, but they're region specific. So you really need to know where the customer is so that you can apply the applicable laws to them. And so that also comes down to that comes down to even more finite into how you store and manage their data. So depending on where you are, the rules are different. It's not just that here's the laws, here are the things you have, here's your customers have to agree to, but it's also on the business, here's how you have to store their data. And those are all different by region, and so you need to know those regions. Of course, the consent, what are you asking the user to consent to? So obviously an EU resident is going to consent to GDPR. A US resident is going to likely consent to the privacy policies of their state. There isn't a federal privacy policy that everyone consents to in the United States. So you need to know which consent form you're asking them to consent to. And then going back to maybe to the more broader global ones, we see a lot of the regulations dictate how data can be transferred across borders. So knowing that if you wanted, for example, to use a marketing vendor in another country, you need to understand that you can only share some of the customers in your database because some of them are protected by region. And so just understanding that and some of the destination regulations that apply to that are important. Again, like I said, there's localized practices. And when I say localized, I don't mean sit at the city or like neighborhood level. I'm talking at the state versus country level, or maybe, or country by country level. And so it's just really understanding sort of the regional standards. And every country can have, or some countries have global policies, and then they have regional policies within them as well. And so you need to understand both of those and how they might impact compliance. And so again, going back to that customer data validation and having an accurate address having confidence in an accurate address is going to give you, confidence that you're following these. When it comes to auditing, as I mentioned at the top, step one, you check the box by using customer data validation. You already check the box that you're doing what you can to capture and maintain accurate customer data. But in addition to that, of course, you can show that in an audit, you can show that you're using their location to apply the region-specific regulations that are part of their thing. If you have any sort of data problem or privacy problem, there are incident responses that are specific to the region. So like I might require a different notification in Portland, Oregon than Ashley might in California. So you need to know where they live, and then of course apply the business rules that give them the proper response and notifications. There's a lot of work going into sort of privacy by design, and that really what we're saying here is, if you're truly trying to protect your customers, compliance and privacy shouldn't be in the way of that. It should be in support of that. And what we're really looking for here is we really want to apply some of the privacy requirements that are in a region. So again, using the GDPR as an example, you have the GDPR as an umbrella for the EU, but maybe within a country or within an area in a country, you really want to apply more stronger regional regulations. And so this allows you to sort of do that by design. So maybe in Germany, you get one set of additional regulations because they want a strict protection there. But as a business, you only want to apply that to the German residents. The data minimization. This is, again, goes back to some of the regulations that come with these data privacy laws, and how you store the data, and what data you can collect. And again, those are different by region. So knowing where your customers are is going to impact which guidelines are applied to them. And of course, in that same vein, there's a bunch of user rights that come with these regulations, and data erasure is just an example of one, and how that's executed or not executed. So in some cases, is really at a regional level. And so again, knowing and having confidence in the location of your customers is critical to good compliance support. The nice thing about all of these are that validation of that data is done instantaneously. It's done against authoritative data sets. And it really allows you to sort of automate a lot of these processes. So there's not a lot of manual handling of this data, which in and of itself can be problematic. So what we're really talking about is harnessing customer data validation. And these examples that we just reviewed only uses the customer address. And customer data validation to really create the advantages and insights that we talked about. But if you remember at the top, we talked about it. This customer data validation is really focused on 5 key attributes: name, address, phone, and device, or the IP of the device. And if you can apply customer data validation to any or all of those pieces of the customer data profile, you're really going to gain more confidence in your customer and prospect data. You're going to drive even more insights and meaningful insights that are going to power informed decisions for your business and customers. And we've been at this for about 20 years, actually over 20 years. I was there on day one. And we invite you to share what your businesses and customer data quality challenges are with our experts. We have probably seen it all, and if we haven't, we can probably sort of attach it to something we know about. And so we offer like over 20 ready-made data validation, customer data validation solutions. And if they're not exactly what you need, they're very simple for us to tailor them to meet your needs and the strategies that you're trying to deploy against. So with that said, I think I'm done for now, and I invite anyone with questions.
Yes, so we do have a Q&A section at the very bottom of your screen. It's a chat box with a question mark, so please feel free to put your questions in that chat. I do have a question for you, Rob. So you talked about how the business logic can be tailored to fit people's needs, your business needs. Is there, and you talked about the quality score that you get, is there a certain score that customers use to determine if they should reject or accept that data?
It's a really good question. It's a little bit of a nuanced, complicated question. It always goes back to what does our customers need. So if you're an e-commerce platform, potentially your range of acceptability is much different than, say, a financial institution. So there isn't one number. What we have found over time is different industries have different numbers, and it really partly depends on the amount of data that you're collecting at the time. Because the more data we can collect, the more we can derive those 130 data points that would allow us to do a more qualitative scoring against those data points. So, that's all a fancy way of just saying the more data we can collect about the customer and create data points from, the more confident we can give you a score. And we'll never, one thing that our scoring doesn't do is guess. We're only going to score on what we know. It's sort of a bad path to go down to guess accuracy. It's sort of, I think that's probably they go against each other, quite honestly. But so when it comes to the scoring, what we're really looking for is if we can get all of the data points, that's great. We're going to have a really strong, accurate score. But let's just say, as an example, you only collect name and email, maybe on a marketing form. Well, those are 2 data points. Those are great. And we're going to give you the best score we can give you based on those 2 data points. In addition to that, it's really important to say this. If one of our services is pretty all-encompassing, it'll take all 5 of those data points and give you an overall score. But in addition to the overall score, you'll get a score for each of those 5 data points as well. And that's really handy for a number of different reasons. So if marketing wants to send an email campaign, they may only be interested in the email score. And so they don't want to necessarily eliminate someone who got maybe a really poor address score, but a high email score. And conversely, if you're doing direct mail or if you're delivering something, your focus is going to be on that address and the accuracy and score of that address. But it really is going to come down to, ultimately, to answer your question, understanding your data, the scores that come out of your data, and then using those scores to figure out what's the comfortable range that you're willing to, accept a lead or a customer, maybe review it, outright reject it, or maybe send it to customer service for further follow-up. So sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but it's nuanced and complicated. And to say that there's a single score would sort of undermine the effectiveness of it.
Right. Awesome. If anybody has any other questions, please let us know. I believe we have a slide with all the information, contact us slide. There it is. We will be sending out an email with this slide deck as well as the webinar recording, so you all can have that to look back to in the future. Thank you again for everybody who joined us today. Thank you, Rob, for sharing all this knowledge, and we look forward to seeing you guys at the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.